What's up, YouTube? This is Quinn from Quintessentials, and today we're going to be building a paludarium. Now let's jump right in. So this is the finished product, and you'll see how we get there. So this is egg lighting diffuser. The idea behind this is to give us structure. They're just zip tied together, and this here is a foam waterfall I made out of spray foam, and I carved it out. And I don't have video footage of how I made that, but it was pretty simple. I just screwed 3 pieces of flat wood together and sprayed it in there. Now that hole there is the filter entrance, and that back corner is the filter that's sitting under the waterfall, and where the pump will sit. And the front space there is where the water will be, and the back space is where the land will be. Now when working with this foam, you can see I'm trying to work either always down to up or across. And working down to up gives you less chance that your foam will collapse on you. And I made a little mistake there, but no worries, it's a little easy fix. And we're just spraying across. Now the cure time for this foam is 24 hours, but you will see that I would recommend 48 hours, and you'll see why later in the video. It'll just make your life easier. And I do it to all sides so that no egg crate is showing. It's a little hard to work in this area, so you have to just do your best. You'll see I get some foam on me, and you'll want to try and wash it off as soon as you can. You should have been wearing gloves, and I highly recommend you wear gloves. It's not worth it getting on your hands. You want to try and get the best seal you can between your glass and your piece, your kind of structure here. It'll just make things a lot easier when you try and seal off down the road. This foam will expand, hence the name expanding foam, and because of that, it'll take up space. So that being said, you don't want to be afraid to use as much foam as you can, as much foam as you have actually, because building up that surface allows you to carve away in different ways, so you can be more creative. Like say you wanted a ledge, then you zip tie an extra piece of egg crate to your main frame there, and then spray that with the spray foam, and that'll give you just that little bit extra that you can, work with. You can do some really cool backgrounds using this method. Now, down the road in this series, I'm going to be talking about what I think I would have changed in this build compared to what I actually did, because there were a few things that I ran into trouble-wise that kind of set back my build and just made my life a little bit harder. Now, this scraper here, this is just a glass scraper. You use it to scrape glass, funny enough, and you can see I'm kind of carving. You want to be careful of your silicone seals that are already in the tank, especially on that bottom corner, or the bottom corners. You just really don't want to damage that seal, otherwise, you put water in there and all of a sudden you're leaking. I did do a water test on this tank to make sure it did hold water before I sprayed this in, and I recommend you do the same. And also with these scrapers, and with this foam dulls your scrapers really, really quick, so make sure you pick up, 10 or more of the blades to be able to do this project without any hassle. And you can see I start to struggle with this right here. I just can't cut anything with it. I ran out of blades, and it didn't take long for me to run out. I only had probably 2 or 3. So I switched to my knife. Now again, this will dull your knife just as quick as it'll dull those razor blades. But if you don't mind sharpening knives, it's a great tool to use. There are two different sizes of these scrapers that I like to use. That orange one that you saw, and there's a little metal one that has maybe 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches of blade instead. And that is a really awesome tool when you go to start shaping things. But I like to use the big scraper for doing the mass of it. Now you'll notice that there's kind of two different textures on this foam. You have the texture where it's like the smooth glossy finish. You have this texture where it's like a porous matte finish. That smooth glossy texture that you see on the top of the structure, you don't want that. You want to remove as much of that as possible, because when you go to silicone seal this, the silicone doesn't like to stick to that gloss. So when you have that porous matte, the silicone has something to hold on to and will give you a better seal in the end. Now you can see I'm being careful of that silicone corner there. And sometimes you have to work it pretty good to get it moving. And you can see I have some gaps in my foam. We're going to come back through and fill those up. So keep these foam pieces, don't just toss them yet. We're going to squish those in, as you'll see later in the video. You see it's be pretty challenging to work with, and in some instances when you don't have a lot of space, you really have to, get in there and start pulling at it. You can see there, why I had to walk away and why I'm keeping this in the video is because I wasn't using gloves, and I didn't let my foam cure for 48 hours. I only let it cure for the 24 hours. And you'll notice I had to run to the restroom real quick and clean up that foam off my fingers, because again, it doesn't once it's dried, it does not like to come off your hands, and if you don't get it right away, it doesn't. And what I ran into here was, when I was carving it, there was still a pocket of that foam that hadn't fully cured. And since we're spraying it on so thick, it's definitely better to let it cure for that 48 hours. And again, we're doing the same thing over here, just carving it out. And, I don't try and make these backsides pretty. I try and make them, get rid of as much of that shiny foam as I can, and try and increase the amount of square footage per se inside of these areas, so that I can have either the most amount of water or the most amount of dirt possible, because the animal that's going in here also likes to burrow and play around in the dirt. You can see there's also two different textures of foam here, or three different textures if you want to include the already cut stuff. You have that kind of dark yellow color, not that kind of pale white yellow color. And my forearm's resting against it there. That stuff is harder, and the way it forms is it actually semi-cures inside of the foam, and then as it's curing and expanding, the outer layer is already cured and doesn't expand anymore, so it breaks through it and then it oozes out, and it becomes it's a lot harder to cut through. It's not a bad thing, it's just something to be aware of when you're working with it. And you can see I kind of try and cut at the soft parts to get it off. And when we go to stuff the crevices with the old foam, this harder foam is the stuff I don't recommend you use for it. It's just not as malleable to fit in these holes. Now you'll see the blade poke through here, and that's me cutting away that front hole that we talked about earlier, which is the filter entrance. And you want a pretty smooth hole in there. You want it to be able to fit your mechanical filtration, which is what I'm placing there, so that my filter, so that no big particles make it into the filter itself or reduce it. And again, it doesn't bother me if this area isn't exactly perfect, because nobody's going to see it if you don't want them to. Like, I'm going to leave this glass panel unpainted on this side so I can show how the filter is arranged, and how I'm using my biomedia and things like that. Just cleaning it up. It can be a little challenging to work in this space because it is such a tall tank, so you can't come in from the top. You can only really come in from the front, and so I recommend you take the door off if you choose to use this style of tank. And I recommend them. They're good tanks. I've always been a fan of the front opening tanks. It makes maintenance easier. And overall they're good looking, they're clean, so I recommend using them, unless of course you want to build your whole tank and do the project from scratch, which is totally cool as well. You can see there I really am I can't stress enough, be cautious of your silicone. Don't be afraid to, work it instead of, cutting in that area. Now back to the front here. This part is the part that people are going to see. So you want to, shape it in the way that you find very aesthetically pleasing. Now on this tank, I ended up having to do it a little flatter because I didn't use enough foam. And that's one of the things that I'll discuss in a later video about things that would change if I were to do this over. And it's definitely, I would be putting a thicker layer of foam on here. And again, you see how I'm not cutting much back. It is because it's kind of flat and I don't have enough foam. So it makes it a little bit harder to get that, get to that porous foam underneath, because I can't cut away as much without cutting into the center of it. And that's another great reason why don't be afraid with your foam. You can see I'm trying to get a nice crisp edge on the bottom there, and that is just as important as getting a crisp edge on the sides. Without that, it is much more difficult to get a silicone seal using this process. And so you definitely want to try and cut that, as clean edged as possible, so that when you lay out your silicone beads, that it definitely seals it properly. And you can see here I have some of those little foam pieces, and I'm trying to find the holes to stuff it in. And you just kind of stuff it in. You want to be careful not to pull on the foam too much. You want to try and keep equal pressure where you can. And you can see I'm just trying to see. Like I said, it's kind of hard to work these back sides just because it's you can't see, you can't get your arm in over the top, so you got to kind of position yourself weirdly here. You decide that foam piece is a little big, so I rip it in half and, find those little holes. And you just push it in. And I failed there. I'll come back and, get it, but you really do have to kind of push it in. And what's kind of nice is, even after you compress this foam, a lot of it will still expand out, so it does like to fill these spaces very, very well. Here's the finished product, and we will show you how to get here. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and stop by to find out how this build is finished. Thanks for stopping by.